2020 is finally over, and with it, another year of video games for us all to sink our time into. The year was an odd one. I'm sure we all have this feeling in our minds that 2020 was meant to be a bigger year for gaming than it ended up being, but that in no means discredits the numerous high quality titles that came out this year, and it's these titles that we want to celebrate in our Source Game of the Year. We all on the SG team nominated our top 3 titles for a variety of categories that we wanted to celebrate, and from this pool picked out the titles we felt were worth celebrating. So let's not waste any time. I'm your host Nantenjex, and let's get into the first category. Best Nintendo Published Game. We know it, you know it, Nintendo is our bread and butter here on this channel, and so it makes sense that all of the quality Nintendo titles this year would get their own award to fight over. From Super Mario 35, a remix of the original Super Mario Bros. With Battle Royale elements, to Paper Mario the Origami King, the latest in the Paper Mario saga, and a vast improvement over the previous 2 titles. Mario has had a decent celebration of his latest anniversary. 3D All-Stars, arguably the star of the show for Mario this year, was a bit of a disappointment, being a collection of ports, and so one considered for this category, unlike Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition and Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Deluxe, a remaster and a remake that took the original games of their series and aimed to make solid improvements all over, while reintroducing the titles to a new audience. Ultimately, new titles are what we crave here at Source Gaming, and Nintendo aimed to please us with some new iterations in core Nintendo series. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity snuck in at the year's end to tell us the story of 100 years prior to the award-winning Breath of the Wild, while giving Zelda and Warriors fans alike one of the best Zelda spin-offs to date. While Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics was the surprising sequel to the DS classic and showed that audiences still wanted something more casual now and again. Also, you can't go wrong with a bit of chess. But it should come as no surprise that Nintendo's biggest success this year would also be our award winner for this category, Animal Crossing New Horizons, the long-awaited 5th mainline title in the Animal Crossing series. New Horizons has quickly become the best Animal Crossing game, both critically and from a sales perspective. Nearly a year on, and the game is still receiving updates that are keeping players engaged in building up their own private island. It's a worthy sequel, and a title that was sorely needed in 2020 in order to recapture that feeling of actually being able to go outside again. Best AAA Game. It's not all about Nintendo, of course. The industry is vast and wide, and it all deserves celebrating. So next up we have the Best AAA category for the big published games across all platforms, and there were a lot of games we considered in this category. We got some strong sequels this year, such as the aptly named Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, which turned out to be a completionist nightmare, but also the best 3D platformer this generation. Yakuza Like a Dragon showed itself to be the real Mother 4, as it found a way to parody the traditional RPG mechanics and tropes within a modern setting, with wonderful dialogue and a lovable cast of characters to explore the backstreets of Tokyo with. Both Genshin Impact and Immortals Fenyx Rising have taken what Breath of the Wild revolutionised and expanded on it in worthy ways, fixing many of the faults that the original had. For the former, this includes multiple playable characters and an ongoing live experience, while the latter involves more action-filled combat and a better emphasis on story. Breath of the Wild fans really had a lot of good food to eat this year. But 3 titles really took the spotlight this year, and it was a really tough decision deciding on who should take the number 1 spot. Half-Life Alyx is to VR what Super Mario 64 was to 3D gaming, and from anyone who has played it, the game is almost certainly their favourite of the year. A well-designed and technically marvellous title for all PC gamers. Over on the console side, Final Fantasy VII Remake brought the world of the classic RPG back in a subversive manner. A complete overhaul of not only the combat and gameplay, but story as well, to ensure that this is a game that even those who have played the original to death will find something new to enjoy. However, our AAA Game of the Year ultimately went to a title on both PC and consoles. A ripping good time that offers infinite amounts of just pure fun. This is, of course, Doom Eternal. the latest title in id Software's flagship and iconic franchise. Doom Eternal is a vast improvement to Doom 2016 in every single way. It's got better gameplay, better level design, tighter controls, more to shoot with, and a plethora of Easter eggs and fan service moments for long-time id Software fans. It teared down the boundaries between modern and classic shooters, and a title that, ironically, feels like a little slice of gaming heaven. Best Indie Game. It's not all about the big dogs, of course. The independent publishers also deserve the attention, and just because they're smaller doesn't mean the quality is any less than the big box office titles. You just need to know where to look, like Deep Rock Galactic, a co-op class-based FPS by Danish studio Ghost Ship Games that crosses Minecraft with Left 4 Dead for an atmospheric good time. Or Hotshot Racing, a classic 90s arcade racer by Sumo Digital and Lucky Mountain Games that truly captures the essence of titles like Ridge Racer or Outrun, while coating itself in nostalgia for the racing games of yesteryear. WayForward's Shantae and the 7 Sirens showed that the Half Genie still has the charm and game design to make a solid and refined Metroidvania, while Empire of Sin shows us that John Romero still has what it takes in his take on an XCOM style strategy game with a 1933 American gangster coating. Then there is Fox from Coatsink, the game with a bark button. Need we say more? 2020 gave us some great multiplayer games as well. Fall Guys by Mediatonic is a game that feels like it should have happened a long time ago. Takeshi's Castle-esque multiplayer game where you and friends compete with and against each other in a collection of randomly selected minigames. With up to 60 people in total, this battle royale game gets pretty wild, but it's so much fun and very satisfying when you manage to gain a crown. As for the other big multiplayer indie game of the year, this of course goes to Golf with Your Friends, a Team 17 mini golf game with a ton of great customization options, from ball size and shapes to full map customization that essentially offers unlimited replay value. Then when you add in 12 players, all golfing simultaneously, you're in for an incredibly good time. It also came out in 2020, unlike that other indie game you all thought I would say. In the end though, our winner for this category had to go to a game that managed to get itself inserted into the cultural zeitgeist of the internet and be a major talking point in online discussion, while also being a high quality game above the rest. And 2 titles achieved that goal for us this year, Hades and Bugsnax. But only one can take the top spot, and well, if you know me, I'm always up for a delicious Greek snack. Hades is an incredibly addicting roguelike that actually bakes the concept of death into the gameplay. The title is filled with fun characters, great presentation, and has many upgrade paths to follow, which made it very addicting. It has a great sense of atmosphere and feels dramatically ahead of the curve in its game design, better than many of the AAA high budget games that also released this year. It's just a lot of fun, and the best indie game from 2020. Best Port or Remaster. Sometimes a new year is a new chance to play a game from a bygone era, and so with this category we want to celebrate the ports and remasters for games that have been given another boost in life this year on a new platform, either being brought over wholesale or with some added touches. This is where Among Us, one of 2020's gaming phenomenas, can be nominated, as it squeezed in a Switch port right before the year end. Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition also managed to make it in this year with its port to the new generation of consoles, complete with the long-awaited Virgil expansion that just added more to an already phenomenal action title. The Switch saw a number of high-quality ports this year from critically acclaimed third-party games like Crysis Remastered and No More Heroes 1 and 2, although Capcom once again gets a shout out for Devil May Cry, as the start of the year saw Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition launch exclusively for the Switch, with a plethora of new features including HD Rumble, style switching, and the addition of a co-op mode. id Software continued to show support for the Doom series by re-releasing Doom 64 for the first time, launching on all platforms and finally making all of the mainline Doom games easily available. It's an incredibly impressive port with new content included to bridge the gap between Doom 2 and Doom 2016, and gave non-Nintendo 64 owners a taste of an underrated gem. Speaking of giving new players a taste of a classic, Persona 4 Golden was finally released outside of its PlayStation Vita prison, albeit only to PC. Still, this is the first time many got to experience the best modern Persona game, and we can now only hope that it can appear in next year's awards as well, when it comes to other consoles, fingers crossed. There were a number of strong indie ports as well in 2020 for Nintendo Switch. La Mulana 2 showed everyone what a real Metroidvania should be like, and delivered a challenging but satisfying tomb raiding experience, while the 1997 cult classic Moon Remix RPG launched outside of Japan for the first time, leading to many Undertale fans to realise that maybe that game wasn't the first to do the whole friendship with monsters gameplay angle. But it's Nintendo and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that wins this award for us. While new stuff was added, it is still a remaster and so viable for this category, and many of the changes they made to the presentation and UI were much needed. The character models look good now, and the menus are easy to navigate. Add on an entirely new epilogue campaign and simply the act of making this game more readily available, and you have the recipe for our favourite port of 2020. Best Art Direction. Gameplay is the most important part of any game, but often it's the presentation that helps a game stick in the minds of players. Whether it be in a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which finally made reality what players imagined the game to look like in their childhood, or Animal Crossing New Horizons, whose cozy island setting and visual customization options gave players more freedom to finally design not just their home, but a town of their liking. Sometimes a game needs to look visually striking to make an impact, like Ghost of Tsushima's celebration of the romanticised Japanese aesthetic, or Ori and the Will of the Wisps' stunning visual effects that show both the true beauty and horror of a micro-world. Sometimes it's just the reappearance of a specific art style that is worth celebrating. Doom Eternal had wonderful visuals that screamed heavy metal, but this time it wasn't all just space stations and generic depictions of hell. There was more variety and flavour this time, from ruined cities to medieval citadels that provided great variety. Then Ninjala went for the hip Tokyo Streets look, a style very similar to Splatoon, but a good one to emulate. Then of course you have the more specific art directions. Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Deluxe took the simple sprites from the original game and gave it a more cel-shaded and storybook look, with environments looking like they could have come straight from Okami and an overall Winnie the Pooh vibe that is a unique look for Pokémon. Moon Remix RPG brought the very quirky and memorable designs of Kazuyuki Kurashima back to the forefront, with a more wacky and disproportionate look compared to some of his later offerings from the Mario & Luigi and Tingle games. Then of course there is Paper Mario the Origami King. The series has always consistently looked gorgeous with its paper aesthetic, and Origami King takes this one step further, with not only stunning visuals but unique environments and moments that really capture and immerse the player in its world. However, despite this, it still didn't manage to take our top spot, which, once again, goes to the celebration of Greek mythology that is Hades. Its art direction is phenomenal, imbuing its world with a dark, edgy, sexy energy. It puts you into the space of its likeable, puckish, rebel teen hero, a space both alien and oddly comforting. Its character designs are full of personality and life, and a happy sexiness, but in a way that never feels exploitative or tawdry or objectifying. Its levels are gorgeous and beautiful, they're ethereal and dark and full of life. It's just overall a very atmospheric and charming game. Best Soundtrack. Visuals are one thing, but the audio is equally as important. Most games come with a solid soundtrack nowadays, so picking out the ones that stand above the others was tough, but ultimately we think our choices are all great bops for different reasons. Persona 5 Royale and La Mulana 2 both provided stylistic and very fitting soundtracks to accompany the player through its various dungeons, while games all about music, like Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memories and No Straight Roads, naturally celebrate their soundtracks and music in general with a wide variety of different music styles, so there is something for everyone to enjoy. Doom Eternal brought with it great sound design and more fantastic tracks to rip and tear demons to pieces with, while Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition and Mystery Dungeon Deluxe took their existing soundtracks and improved them in almost every way, with high quality sounds and new additions to enhance the original tracks. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity took this to the extreme, taking the fairly mundane and plain OST of Breath of the Wild and remixing it to be more action-packed, with some of the best remixes of classic Zelda tunes ever made. But our winner in this category actually goes to Paper Mario the Origami King. It was an incredibly close battle between it and Final Fantasy VII Remake, and while the latter has an incredible soundtrack, as expected of the series, we wanted to award Paper Mario for its almost entirely original score. With catchy battle music and unique tracks for every area of the game, the OST really stands out as one of the best parts of it. There is a ton of variety from techno to idol music to Eurobeat included, and it all comes with a charm that makes it easily fit into the Mario universe. Not to mention that final castle music is oh so glorious in how it both hypes up the player and gives off an aura of menace. Best Story. Our last individual category is dedicated to the narrative of a game, whether it be directly or indirectly given to the player. Titles like No Straight Roads and Ghost of Tsushima have stories that celebrate their core message and the worlds they are presenting, whether that's a rock and roll world where music is king, or the feudal Japanese countryside where samurai and the warrior's code are an important aspect of everyday life. While controversial to some, Paper Mario the Origami King and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity look to address the issues levied against their stories in previous games by putting a stronger focus on the narrative and the character interactions that take place within these worlds, and we think they did a mighty fine job of both. Half-Life Alyx had a story that had an incredibly high bar to jump, needing to be satisfying to an audience waiting over a decade for a new installment in the Half-Life series, and one that forwarded the plot along. And we think it did it fantastically. Meanwhile, Yakuza Like a Dragon had a fresh start with a new protagonist and set of characters that managed to be just as charming as the original Adventures of Kiryu, with many ridiculous and memorable moments for fans to love. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition and Moon may not be entirely new games, but their stories and narratives are still beloved by many and are still worthy of praise, especially in the former's case, which added new story content that aimed to tie up a couple of loose ends and put some welcomed character development on one of the game's most popular characters. You might think mentioning ports in this section is a bit unfair, but we felt like we needed to because our ultimate winner of this category is a remake of one of the most beloved RPG stories ever told, Final Fantasy VII Remake. While it's only one part of the original game, Final Fantasy VII Remake manages to justify this by not only expanding out its world and adding more depth to the characters and scenarios that happen during this point of the plot, but it also goes beyond being a simple retelling of the original story. For better or worse, fans are incredibly intrigued to see where part 2 of this remake will go, and it has left us all talking about it long after the game released, which is the sign of a successful story. Now, before we get to our Game of the Year, as was the case last year, we gave our Patreons the chance to nominate their favourite games as well, and we got a lot of variety for this category. From sequels to popular titles like Spelunky 2 and Puyo Puyo Tetris 2, to brand new titles like Carrion and Granblue Fantasy Versus, there was a ton to choose from, and so we wanted to highlight some of the more unique options before we get to the winner. Games like Harmonix's Fuser brought that classic rhythm game action and combined it with the internet pastime of song mashups to let players make any number of musical abominations or masterpieces from existing songs. Meanwhile, Part-Time UFO showed that HAL isn't all just Kirby, with a fun little puzzle game about a UFO just looking to make some cash and buy new hats, something we can all relate to. Samurai Jack Battle Through Time was a surprising title that aimed to tie up and improve upon the final season of the show by telling the canonical untold tales of Jack and his battle against the evil Aku, while Half-Life Alyx got another shout out for its innovations to the VR scene and gaming as a whole. Microsoft Flight Simulator has captivated gamers with the technology at play, allowing players to fly over an accurate rendition of the entire world, excluding the occasional monolith or deep black hole that pops up from time to time. While 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim told a narratively rich story from the perspective of multiple protagonists in a war-torn world, capturing the attention of anyone who played it with its deep, albeit sometimes overwhelming storytelling. But the Patreon pick for this year goes to Animal Crossing New Horizons. Many of the titles you would expect, like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Hades, got nominated as well here, but Animal Crossing New Horizons beat out the competition by more than double the votes. Is that because we are primarily a Nintendo channel, or is this a testament to the unprecedented success this game has seen over the year? It's probably a bit of both. And with that, we come to our Game of the Year. Unlike last year, we wanted to do something a little different. We took the winners and some runners-up from each category here and created a list of nominations for our Source Game of the Year, and then left it up to you guys, the audience, to vote on which game you think deserved that coveted title. The nominees are all on screen right now, and it is my pleasure to announce that the winner is Clubhouse Games, 51 Worldwide Classics. Yes, seriously, you all clearly have immaculate taste. I'm sure chess was Game of the Year at least once in the history of mankind, so a game with chess and 50 other games? Nothing else really stood a chance, did it? Clubhouse Games isn't perfect by any means, but it has a wonderful presentation and is something everyone can enjoy. It's also a great learning tool for introducing new games like Hanafuda and Mahjong to a wider audience. It's a game that comes with benefits beyond simply being fun, and was a surprise hit of 2020. And that does it for our Source Game of the Year. Thank you all for listening, and let us know what your favourite games of 2020 were down in the comments below. Special shout out to all of our Patreons. All of the $5 patrons are on screen right now, but I wanted to give a special thanks out to all of them for voting in their Patreon category, and we had a nice little chat in the Discord about what our favourite games were and stuff. It was fun time. If you want to know how you can join the Patreons and take part in that category next year and other projects as well, there's a link in the description below or on screen right now, a little button somewhere around here in the corner. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And I know it's 2021 now, but hopefully it'll be a better year than last. So I hope you stay with us to enjoy what should be a fantastic year, and you can do this by remembering to always return to the source.